I recently just got back from a trip to Banff, Canada, and for that trip, I traveled with the M4 iPad Pro. I'm not gonna lie, it felt really weird because for the first time I was leaving behind my MacBook and I felt like I didn't have a computer with me. But in order to give this iPad Pro a fair chance at being a travel computer and work in the same way that I would use my MacBook Pro on a trip, I had to take it with me and leave the MacBook Pro behind. And I've got a lot of thoughts to share with you, both good and bad, as to whether or not the M4 iPad Pro can actually be my computer. Now, typically when I'm on a trip, I take my SD card out of my camera to view different photos and stuff. But what I was able to do was directly connect the iPad via USB-C to my camera and drop over all the photos at the end of the day. While we were, going about and seeing the different places, I wasn't really using the iPad Pro all that much. But when I did use it was at nighttime when we got back. And for those things like transferring the files over to a folder in the Files app, that was pretty easy. It wasn't difficult whatsoever. At the same time, I really enjoyed editing the photos in Lightroom because, as I've mentioned before, I love having touch input and then also pencil input to do those things, and it just is a different experience on the iPad compared to when you're doing it on a MacBook or a desktop computer. Now, the first thing that I really had trouble with is just balancing the iPad. The iPad is top heavy, and anytime you want to put it in your lap, it's really frustrating because it just wants to fall over, right? It doesn't want to just sit in place. Now, there are times where you'll be able to finesse your legs in a way to make it balance, but other times I just found myself literally holding part of the iPad top portion just so that it wouldn't fall over, and also resting my wrist on the Magic Keyboard so that way I could keep it in place. I found that to be frustrating. Like in the beginning, yes, I did get used to it, but from time to time it is really annoying because a MacBook doesn't do that. So maybe Apple can incorporate a little bit more weight to the Magic Keyboard itself so that way it doesn't want to topple over, or perhaps ultimately the iPad will be so light that this just won't be a thing anymore. Now, other than that, throughout the trip, I had no issues whatsoever. I was able to do everything. This is a Wi-Fi only model, so I was either connecting to the hotel Wi-Fi, or if we were out and about and had to stop somewhere and I wanted to use this, I was using this with the hotspot on my phone, because that's what I do with my iPad mini and it works great. I've never found it necessary to have a separate data plan for my iPad. That's just the way I do it. You might do it a little bit different, and that's totally fine. Now, where the troubles actually began for me is at this desk setup. So initially I tried Stage Manager and it was great, but I think part of why it was great in the beginning was the fact that this was something new. It's really exciting whenever you get a new tech product and then you have something as amazing as this, right? And such a thin form factor, such amazing performance, such an amazing display, and you're just blown away that this device is literally doing all my computing needs. But then when it comes to certain computer things, such as connecting peripherals and displays, that's where things get a little bit tricky. So my first problem was with the display. This is an ultra-wide HDR monitor. It works perfectly fine with my MacBook, but whenever I connect my iPad, same is the case for my iPad mini. Even if I try to connect my iPad mini, the resolution is just weird, the colors are off, and there's no way for me to make it work unless I set this iPad to standard definition, color range, and then it works perfectly fine. Now that is something that I could work with, but why have all the colors and capability of this beautiful display not carried over to something like this ultra-wide desk setup? Because this is an important space for me. I do my video edits here, and I love having a larger canvas to work with. And so if this is not going to work the right way with my monitor, then it becomes useless for me. The second problem is my label printer. So I connected this via USB-C, just like I do with my MacBook, to my label printer, and it just can't read it. Again, if it was an AirPrint printer, then yeah, I could print labels for my online store. But again, I'm not just going to go out and do that specifically just to make the iPad work. That's something I do on a daily basis, and it's very crucial to my work. So not having this work with that really sucks. Now, I could get past the monitor, I could get past the label printer, but where I really got frustrated was with the Magic Keyboard and Magic Trackpad. Now, when I have my MacBook plugged into the monitor here, and as soon as I actually bring it here and I have the MacBook open, the Magic Keyboard and Magic Trackpad are close by and they just auto connect and I begin using them. That's not the case with the iPad Pro. When I bring the iPad Pro here, and let's say I do have the MacBook here, I have to disable the Bluetooth, disconnect them, turn these on and off, reconnect them to the iPad for it to even work. But then I also tried just taking away the MacBook from this space, and that is the same case. Like it works in the same way. They just don't auto connect. And what's frustrating about that is that the Magic Keyboard and the Magic Trackpad are not third-party devices. They're not made by Logitech or something that I could maybe even understand that, okay, my keyboard and trackpad are not in the ecosystem, so that's why they're not working. This is just one of those like Apple things that they probably don't want it to work in the same way that it does with your MacBook, like the display. Like, when you have the AirPods on and let's say you're working on your iPad and you're doing your thing, as soon as you get a phone call or something on your iPhone and you answer that or you start using your iPhone, they magically transfer over, right? And I just can't understand why that can't be the case with this Magic Keyboard and trackpad, and they just work with the iPad because that would be wonderful. That would just make my life so much easier. I even tried completely taking the iPad off this Magic Keyboard case and then plugging it in to see if that maybe, since it's connected to the Magic Keyboard, that's why the problem's happening. Nope, that's not the case. So the conclusion that I came to after all of this is that, wow, here I have this beautiful display, this amazingly thin computer in my hands that can just be a semi-computer. Like if I had a Mac Mini at this desk setup that was a dedicated computer for this, then yeah, I guess I could make it work. But even then, taking things back and forth between this and your desktop computer, it's tricky, especially if you're doing things like video editing and stuff like that, because I don't have LumaFusion here. I only have it here. So I would have to export the project from here and then import it into Final Cut and finish it there. It just becomes tricky. And that's what is so frustrating about the iPad. And that's what brings the iPad at this weird intersection of this thing started as that in-between device. When Steve Jobs got on stage, he was like, hey, you have an iPhone, you have a MacBook, but what do you do in between? You have the iPad. They introduced this, and it was great for that. People made fun of it. Ha ha ha, it's just a larger iPhone. A tablet is great to have, to do those in between things, and there's just something wonderful about having the internet in your hand in such a light form factor and such a beautiful display that is just awesome. But then again, you're like, okay, this is just overkill because this machine here is so overpowered for what I am doing with it that it just doesn't make sense. Like this entire setup, the Magic Keyboard, the new pencil, and all of this costs $2,600. And that's when you're like, okay, I can get all that in between type of stuff done on something like my iPad mini. Or if the mini is too small for you, the standard iPad, that'll be good enough for you. So that's really up to you. Honestly, it's going to be up to you whether or not this can fit into your life. Like if everything that you do is on an iPad and it can happen within iPad OS, within all the different apps that are available, then yeah, this can be your computer. But for me, it's just not there yet. And it's really sad because I really, really love this device, but until it's not where I want it to be, I can't recommend it. Thank you so much for your time. I really hope that my experience, my insight can help you decide whether you should be looking at the M4 iPad Pro as your personal computer. But for just an iPad, this is overkill. You're better off just buying a standard iPad or even the iPad mini. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. If you enjoyed, please do give it a thumbs up as it really helps me out. Take care of yourself, and like always, I will catch you in the next video.